going to start a couple of minutes early because the previous speaker finished quite early. So who here is doing BDD? No one? Anyone doing BEHAT? Or heard of BEHAT? A couple of people, okay. Did I hear a booing at the back? No. Okay. So this is BDD. You're doing it all wrong, perhaps. So you may be doing it right. I don't know. So my name's Andrew. I'm a software delivery professional. So from an engineering perspective, I do Drupal, and I've done lots of other things as well. Worked on some large Drupal sites and installations. From a process point of view, I do a lot of Agile, Scrum, BDD, that sort of thing. So my typical day is sort of 70% engineering and sort of 30% managing projects and things like that. These are my email and Twitter things and that. Today we're going to be looking at what is BDD and looking at some common anti-patterns, which you may or may not have come across. So, first question that I kind of always ask is this. I'm using BEHAT, so am I doing BDD? So BEHAT, for those of you who don't know, does anyone not know what BEHAT is? Okay, a few people. Okay, so BEHAT is a framework for you can basically drive a browser to run automated tests. So it's a bit like a front onto Selenium, but it's a bit more than that as well, and we'll go into that in a minute. So I'm using BEHAT, I'm doing BDD. So what is BDD? So this is the kind of the classic definition of it. Second generation, outside-in, pull-based, multiple stakeholder, multiple scale, high automation, agile methodology. So that's clear, right? That's kind of like the usual response to that. So maybe we're better looking at the problems that BDD is trying to solve. And this is by and large our sort of problem space as engineers. I think someone said that most of the problems we come across in developing software is debugging the specification, and most of our complex communication problems, most of our problems are language problems, communication problems, not technical ones by and large. I mean, we do have technical issues, but by and large, most of us are just building websites. We're not trying to land satellites on Meteors or anything like that. So the things that hinder us typically are things like jargon. So when you've got business stakeholders, you're using technical terms that we're not fully aware of, or we think we might know what they are, but make assumptions. Think of Chinese whispers, where someone might say something and it kind of gets passed down the line, and by the time it gets to you, the message is all confused. And early solutionizing, which is a client will typically come to and say, well, we want X, Y, Z, and form it in as a solution rather than in terms of their business problem. And some of the consequences here is that we're kind of locked into delivering late products, delivering the wrong product before we've even written a line of code, before even the specification has got down to us. And it's sort of exemplified by this next cartoon, which I think everyone should have seen this cartoon by now, I guess. So, this is how the customer explained it, and how the various people in the chain thought about the product. And these are all kind of, just come out because of language problems, communication problems, nothing technical there really. And the kind of last one, what the customer really needs, is quite interesting. It's my kind of favourite quote on it. That's kind of the early solutionising kind of problem. The customers really wanted to get from A to B faster, but the the only way they're able to express themselves is in those terms. So where does BDD and BEHAT fit into all this? So we've got our business guy over there. That's all business guys look like that. We've got kind of Drupal and Firefox here, and we've got BEHAT sitting in the middle. And BDD is kind of shown by these golden arrows. So it's basically based around a conversation. So we have, it's a process based around a conversation. So we have a conversation with our business guy, and he explains problems to us. And we set out to do some discovery work and learn about the problems he's facing, rather than just sort of instantly coming up with a solution. And from the other side, past BEHAT, we use BEHAT to drive the browser, to drive Drupal to do certain things, to provide us with automated tests to ensure that our solution is still fitting the requirements. So what quite often happens is when we're doing automated testing, we sort of start off with these requirements and we go straight through to automation. We think that, the customer's come up with requirements and it needs to do X, Y, Z, so we'll build this form and do this, and we go straight into automation. But the BDD process enables us to understand and discover a lot more about the business problems and try to find better solutions or best solutions, so that we don't end up delivering the wrong software or even designing the wrong software before we even started building. So we build a bit slowly. So the first thing is built around this conversation. So we have a conversation with the clients, and out of that comes light bulb moments where we have this discovery process. So we might find out a particular thing about a communication solution. So for instance, the client may say, well, we want to email our clients with details of offers. But out of this conversation discovery process, we might actually discover that SMS or Twitter or whatever, some other form of communication is more appropriate or just as appropriate. So there's a whole discovery process that comes out around this conversation with the client. And then from that, we can start to build a specification. And the specification needs to be something that lives in the language of that everyone can understand, that all the stakeholders in the project can understand. So the specification is for everyone. It's for the client to fully understand. It's for developers to build off of. It's for automated testers to sign off. Sorry, manual testers to use and sign off on. It's very important that it's kind of as jargon-free as possible. And for anyone who's sort of dipped their toe into domain-driven design, it should be using those sorts of techniques around the ubiquitous language. And then at the bottom of the stack we get BEHAT, which is our tool that drives the automation. So BDD basically leads us to delivering the specifications that are executable specifications. So they're written in English language or common language. They can be executed using BEHAT, and they're focused on delivering business value rather than specific technical features, and also written in the domain language of the business, which means basically everyone, all stakeholders should be able to understand every single statement in there. There shouldn't be any sort of hidden jargon, implicit assumptions, that sort of thing, things that can catch us out so often. And BEHAT is a tool for automating these specifications. So there is, in answer to the question, just because you're using BEHAT and I'm doing BDD, it's definitely no, because you don't necessarily have to be doing all these things around BDD to be using BEHAT. So BEHAT is a tool that enables our use of BDD. So we go on now to looking at some of these anti-patterns. And everyone's familiar with that term? It's kind of everyone's familiar with the term anti-pattern, right? Yeah, she's nodding heads. No? Okay. So basically a pattern in software development is a good thing, because it enables you to kind of create a template, if you like, for doing something. And so if you have this kind of repeatable process for maybe a logging form, you might have a pattern for doing that, so a fairly well-known pattern. Anti-pattern is kind of just the opposite of that. It's things that should flag up alarm or sound alarm bells, flag up warnings, because there's definitely something wrong in the way you're going about doing whatever you're trying to do. So that's what an anti-pattern is. So in Drupal, a typical anti-pattern might be putting SQL in template files. That's a big anti-pattern. I'm sure no one does that. Okay, so he's a business guy, and he's come up with this this requirement. So it's all journeys sold between Brussels and Chicago with a child ticket should have at least one accompanying adult or senior ticket. So basically no children alone travelling from Brussels to Chicago. So typically what happens is when you're going through this conversation, or when you're building in an agile way, if you're building user stories, you'll start by gathering some requirements and then building user stories out of them. And so what people typically do is this. So typing away really fast. And so as a user, because that's what they will start, I want to be prevented from purchasing a child-only journey from Brussels to Chicago, so that, of course, you don't ever want to be prevented from doing anything on the website. So the problem here is the as a user anti-pattern has kind of crept in. When you're building user stories, it's very, very easy just to kind of slip into this almost thing you learn by rote. You do as a user, I would like to do this, so that's whatever. But in very few cases can you actually sort of genericize a user like that. You should really be very specific about who the user is in question, what they're actually trying to do, and maybe build up some personas so that you've got types of users on the website or types of people in the business, because it's not necessarily the user who's driving this sort of thing. So perhaps something better would be this, because this is actually probably more realistic. As the company lawyer, I want to prevent customers purchasing child-only tickets so that we're compliant with regulations. And what this does actually gives us two really great things. It tells us who actually cares about this. So if we've got a question about this thing that we're building, we know who's driving this and who's, who the senior stakeholder is here. Here it's the company lawyer. And we know, why they care about this. So it's compliant with regulations rather than it's just something they want to do on a whim. So this gives it's more reflective of the situation within the company, and it's also definitely gives you a signpost to sort of look for in terms of who you need to speak to about this requirement and the reasons you're actually building the software. Because we don't just build features for the sake of it. We're delivering a business value, and this is the business we're building value for. Okay, so what typically happens next is that this might, if you're not used to BEHAT, this might be a bit strange, but typically what happens is that you'll get a tester or someone from your test team or BEHAT user or whatever to start writing tests, and they'll build out something like this. And this is our second great anti-pattern. This is, typically how you see a lot of these BEHAT tests. They're interesting in that they've got lots of things wrong with them. If you wrote PHP code like this, if you wrote module code like this, it'll never get through code review. but you see so many BEHAT tests like this, it's untrue. So, you know, first of all, who even understands this? Will your manual tester understand it? Will the marketing guy who needs to sign off this feature understand it? It's not a kind of shared piece of documentation that all the stakeholders can get involved in. It's got lots of repetition here, so you see all this, and I select these different values from these different X months. It's tightly coupled with these URLs. There's some horrible tight coupling there. All these kind of things that we try and get away from as software developers. It's got tight coupling with the DOM as well. So those, you know, if those DOM elements changed, and this needs to change, but this shouldn't change because this should be the specification for your application, and your specification shouldn't change just because you've changed the CSS or DOM IDs. And there's hard-coded messages in there as well. All kind of really horrible things that we shouldn't do in software development, and we shouldn't do when we're writing specifications either. So a better way of showing this is using this terminology. Now, this is a lot clearer, I hope. It definitely explains the intent very clearly. You can just easily look at that and you can understand, I hope, certainly the first third and fourth lines, what's going on there. So it's easy for all the stakeholders to get involved with this and to understand what's going on. It's reduced our repetition, and it's also enabled us to add some examples here. So in the second line, those placeholder values in angle brackets. What will happen is BEHAT will run through this each time, and for each line in this examples table underneath here, we'll just fill in the placeholders with those fields from that table. So the first line is run Brussels to Chicago with one child. Second, Brussels to Chicago with two children. Each time making sure that when it runs, it sees the child fair policy message. So this is from a software development point of view, this is kind of there's a lot of best practice going on in here, but also from creating a specification that anyone can use. People can just drop into the project, read this and understand what's meant to happen. And this is built on a thing called page objects, which is a common pattern within automated testing, and it's also sort of made its way through to BEHAT as well. So it's based upon, it enables you to do good software development and engineering practices like separation of concerns, encapsulation, don't repeat yourself. And it hides the implementation details so that we didn't see any particular references to individual DOM nodes and fields. We just saw in that previous example what the intent was. So basically we can search for tickets for a certain number of passengers rather than fill in a particular field with a particular value, because the field might change, the value might change, but the intent of searching for passengers is the key thing that the business is interested. So in order to create page objects, basically you create an API for sort of things you do on the page. So you would view a page or part of the page and say to yourself, well, I want to, on a particular, so you split the page up into various different elements. So we've got a search form here that you can do certain things on when this slide's finished loading. The beach ball on my screen at the moment. So this the search form might be encapsulated in this search form class, and the search form knows things like setting origins, that's where you encapsulate how you set an origin, you fill it in there. So that what you can then do is refer to it in a search page class. So the search page class knows how to search for things, and it does that by loading the search form where it says this get search form. Then it will set the origin and set the destination and set the passages, etc. It also knows how to get warning messages off the pages. So all the nitty-gritty, all the detail of the implementation is hidden away in these page objects. Which means in BEHAT you've got these things called feature contexts, which translate the English language specification into PHP. So at the top there you've got this context, this method called I should see the policy message, and what that does, it ensures that the policy message appears on the page, so that when in your specification it says I should see the adult child policy message, that function is called, which then calls the search page class. So basically all the encapsulation is hidden away. So you don't, and you certainly shouldn't have individual field IDs, CSS IDs, DOM nodes in your BEHAT specifications at all. And the approach to building these is just to start with a wireframe and describe in English what you do on the page. Actually, a good technique for this is to just speak to someone, or do the classic thing, get a rubber duck and explain to the rubber duck how you interact with the page. You can really say, well, on this page I search for things, on this page I fill out traveller details, that sort of thing. And then you write functions that map onto the actions that regular visitors will do, and then just constantly refactor those. And what this enables us to do is to, when new requirements come along, so for instance we've got a new requirement from the business guy, he says all journeys between Brussels and Cape Town with 2 or more child tickets should have at least one adult senior, so you can have one child but from Brussels to Cape Town, but no children travelling alone from Brussels to Chicago. So what this enables us to do, because we've encapsulated everything, we've lost all our repetition, it enables us to just build these additional examples here. So in order just to test this new requirement, we've just added these 4 new items down the bottom of the examples table. Whereas in our original example, we'd have had to do lots of copy and paste, which obviously is a terrible idea. But if we need to do any refactoring with DOM IDs or whatever, there's been lots of duplication we'd have had to fix. And so the final anti-pattern that's really commonly used is this. So we've been asked to add some front-end validation. So when the user selects the origin destination, then we can make an AJAX request and we download the rules which will determine the child ticket policies. So we don't have to do a round trip to the server after selecting all the actual tickets. So what typically people do is, if I go to the ticket page, I'll select Brussels and I'll select Chicago, and I wait 3 seconds because it takes 3 seconds to do the AJAX call, and if you don't put that in there, then your test will fail. But we're trying to build specifications, and that's and I wait 5 seconds while I wait 3 seconds is never part of anyone's specification. You never sort of read that in the spec that you need to wait a certain number of seconds after this. And what I've also seen happen is that people build automated test suites and I wait 5 seconds, and then a couple of weeks later the 5-second timeout won't be long enough, and they just increase it to, and I wait 30 seconds, and then your test suite starts to run into hours and hours and hours because you're doing all this waiting around. So not only is it not part of the specification, quite obviously, but it's also not part of it is not really best practice at all. So to fix that sort of thing, in BEHAT we can use spin functions, and spin functions basically use the lambda functionalities in PHP 5.3, I think it is, or 5.4 and above. So basically you can create a spin function down the bottom here, which basically just sits there and waits till the adult's ID, adult node ID is available on the page. And it's called through the spin function, so we're passing one function into another function, and the spin function will basically just check every second to see whether that adult's ID is available, and it'll wait until then. So if it returns in 1 second, 5 seconds, or 30 seconds, it will only wait as little time as possible. So, just to briefly review, it's not about writing tests, it's about discovering the specification for that. That's what BDD is about. If you just sort of see people saying, right, we're doing BDD because we've got BEHAT running some tests, that's really not what it's about. It's all about discovery, learning about what business wants, suggesting better ways of doing it, and coming up with a usable specification that all stakeholders can understand. Yes, automation through BEHAT is a nice thing that happens as part of that, but it's not testing. Testing isn't the key to BDD. And you can see that here. We've gone from this sort of thing, which looks like it doesn't look like it's a part of a specification, to this. And we've gone from something like this, which isn't readable by anyone else really, apart from the developer who wrote it, through to something like this, which should be a lot more readable. So it's all about discovering specifications, not writing tests. That's the absolute key to what BDD is about. So, just recapping, it's not going from requirement to automation, it's going from requirement to discovery to specification to automation. I think that's just about it. I've got some links. So the top set of links is sort of reading about domain-driven design and BDD and how to sort of engage with clients on that. And the bottom section is about some code that you can look at and play with BEHAT and various different other extensions that offer things in addition to that. Okay. I think I'm done, so if anyone's got any questions. Okay. Oh yeah, what?
Yeah, I mean, and the gist that we had so far, so you actually need the test written, and then you need some kind of translation layer between the test and your implementation.
Yeah, so you've got your specification here, which is your English language. So the question is about how BEHAT takes the specification and turns it into tests. Is that the architecture of it? Yeah. So it's basically you have BEHAT, which kind of sits here, and on this side you've got the specification that's readable by all the various different stakeholders, and it can be signed off and understood. It's also a kind of form of living documentation, really. And on this side you've got BEHAT, which will interpret that, and internally, version 2.4, which is the prior version, the current version uses regexes to kind of match those strings and put variables in, and we'll call PHP functions basically in a particular set of classes, and then that will drive various web drivers, so it'll drive Selenium or Phantom.js or any of these kind of web drivers. And when it fails to run a step correctly, it'll throw an exception, and then that can be then flagged up in your continuous integration machine.
That means that you need to write your English language test, you really need to get the spelling right, otherwise it doesn't find the correct class name.
Yes, although it does do some nice things. So if you write it incorrectly and try to run it, it'll suggest, it'll say, I can't understand this, and it'll suggest like an outline skeleton PHP function for you to fill in. And at that point you can realise you've not spelled it correctly. But it's also, there is some internationalisation in it, but I'm only an English speaker, so I would say that. So I've not really looked at the internationalisation side of things, but I think you can specify the tests in other languages too. Any more? Okay, thank you very much.